All right, so now we're moving on to our final unit of the year. All right, our last one. Yay! We're almost finished. We're almost at that finish line. All right, and what this whole unit is going to be on statistics. Our first video, video 6A, we are just going to focus on 4 things on how we can calculate them. So that's mean, median, mode, and range. All right, so we're going to learn how to calculate these 4. So that's what our learning objectives are. It's just how to calculate the mean, how to calculate the median, how to calculate the mode, and how to calculate the range. The one thing I want to say that is really, really important about this video is please make sure you're writing down all these definitions, all right? Because they're not hard or difficult, but since it is new to a lot of you, it may be difficult for you to remember how to find each, but you're going to notice that these are actually really simple. All right, they're very simple. Some of the easiest things that we would have done this for this year, it's just, can you remember what is the mean? How do we find it? What is the median? How do we find that? What is the mode? How do we find that? And what is the range and how do we find that? All right, but finding them is actually really simple. All right, so before we go into the definitions of a mean or average, let's just talk about it real quick. All right, so let's say that 4 friends are sitting at a table and they're comparing how many cookies they have. And Steve has 6 cookies, Chris has 3, Josh has 5, and Mark has 2. And Mark's a little jealous because he doesn't have as many as everyone else. So he might say, hey, guys, you know what? How about we put all of our cookies together and then we evenly distribute them so that way everyone has the same amount. So Mark is thinking, okay, you know what? This way it could be fair. We're all going to have the same amount of cookies. And maybe Steve and Josh and Chris are all good friends. They're like, hey, you know what? Yeah, let's make sure everyone is equally as happy. So what they do then is they say, okay, let's make sure we all have the same amount of cookies. So then Steve will take his 6 cookies, Chris will take his 3, Josh takes his 5, and Mark takes his 2. So they add them all up to see how many they have. So then that's 9, that's 14, that's 16. So they know, okay, between the 4 of us, we have 16 cookies. So if we want to make sure that we all have evenly as many cookies, then we need to go ahead and we need to take those 16 and divide them by the 4 people that we have here. And 16 divided by 4 means that each person should be getting 4 cookies. I apologize. My writing tablet is not responding as well as it should right now, so it's lagging a little bit. But each person should get 4 cookies. So that means Steve is going to take 2 of his cookies, and maybe he just gives them both to Mark, so that way Mark will have his 4 cookies. And Josh will take 1 of his cookies, so that way he's at 4, and he'll give Chris 1 of his, so that way he's at 4 as well. If this question made sense to you, this is the mean. This is the average. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the definition first, and then we'll do one example and move on to the next one. So what is a mean? Well, the mean of a data set is a sum of the data divided by the number of data values. So like we had all those cookies, we added them up, and we divided by the number of people we had. It's another way of calling it is an average. So a mean is your average. So if 4 people get a test score and their test scores vary, the mean tells us, well, what did they each get on average if we were to combine all their scores and divide it equally in that way, instead of one person getting an A and another person getting an F, that we can make sure that they're all getting equal value. So it's saying what would we have if each person was getting equal amount of points, was getting equal amount of cookies. So it's a way for us to say, okay, if you scored a 90 on the test, and all of your class average to get an 80, well, it shows that you are 10 points higher than the rest of your class, 10 points higher than the average of the rest of your class. So it's a way for us to see, well, what did everyone do that took this? And then you can kind of start comparing the data to that average. We won't do that this year, but you will in the future. But it's a way of thinking about it is, okay, well, what would each person get if we can break them down equally? What would each person score if we can give them equal scores across the board? So it's taking the sum and dividing it about how many data values we have, which in some cases will be people or games, whatever it may be. But it's really easy. All we're doing is just adding up and then dividing. All right, let's go ahead and do a problem. All right, so the question here says, finding the mean. The table shows the number of text messages sent by a group of friends over 1 week. What is the mean number of messages sent? So what is the average? On average, what did each person send? All right, so the first thing that we would do then is we would then add up. And maybe you want to do this, right, before we get into solving this. Maybe you do this because maybe Josh's parents are like, wow, Josh, you text and send so many messages. Or maybe even Kevin's parents think that he sends a lot of messages because they're just seeing 82. But this is now allowing us to look at this information and compare it amongst our peers or other people as well to see, well, actually, did you send a lot? Well, let's see, what did this group of friends send between them? What was the average that each person sent? And then we can compare ours to theirs like we will in the future. Not right now, but like we will in the future. All right, so what we do first is we add up all the text messages that we have. So 120 plus 95 plus 101 plus 125 plus 82 plus 108 plus 90. All right, for this, you guys are allowed to use a calculator. All right, we've already done a lot of assessments on your calculations and multiplications and adding. You can use a calculator during this section as well, since we're going to be dealing with larger numbers and just to make it go by a little bit quicker. So when we add all these up, that means that all of these friends sent on total is 721 text messages. So now we need to figure out, well, what was the average? What did each person on average send? Well, now we need to count, well, how many people do we have? Or how many data values do we have? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that means what we would do is we would take the sum of all of the text messages, 721, and we divide it by the number of data values that we have, or in this case, people, 7, and that will give me 103. So that means my mean is equal to 103 messages, or my average is equal to 103 messages. I don't want you using this average. I want you guys using the proper name mean. It's just, some of you may have heard the word average before, so it might be a little bit easier for you to think about it in that terms. All right, but it's really easy finding the mean. You add up all of your value, all of your data that you have, and then you just divide it by your data value. So in this case, we added up all of our text messages, and we divided by how many people we had. All right, let's move on to the next topic. All right, the next one is our median. And our median, a way that you can remember this is you're going to say middle. All right, we're not going to, you're going to think about it in terms of middle. We're not going to say middle. We'll use our proper term median. But what this is we must order the data, and we must order it from least to greatest. All right, so we list out all of our data from least to greatest, and then it's the number with the middle value. Right, so if it's an odd number that we have, so we have an odd total number of values, well, then it's easy. It's the one directly in the middle. If we have an even number of values, this is where it gets a little bit trickier. Well, then our median is the mean or the average of the two middle values. Right, so write down this definition. Make sure that you are doing this, that you're listing from least to greatest. All right, it is very important. If you don't list them from least to greatest, it's impossible for you to get this answer right. So you must order your data, and that means list it from least to greatest. All right, and then we just look for the middle value. And sometimes we don't have an exact middle number, so that means we need to take the average of the two numbers that are directly in the middle. And we'll go through that momentarily. All right, this next one, mode, this one's the easiest. It's just which appears the most. So the mode of a data set is a value or values, because it can appear, we have more than one mode, that occur most often. Data can have one mode, more than one mode, or no mode. So if I give you a data value set of 1, 2, 3, not a number, there's no number that appears more than once. So that means this one would not have a mode. All right, but we can have one or more mode when we're doing this. So when all values occur only once, there is no mode, like I just said. All right, but this is the easiest. Mode, most, it kind of like sounds like it, and that's what you have to remember. It's what appears the most, all right, and that is our mode. We're going to go ahead and answer a question now dealing with our median and mode, and then I'm going to create another one just to show you guys where it can appear more than once as well. Let's say you have this next problem. It says find the median and the mode of the following bowling scores. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is remember, when we're doing our median, we must order them. So we must list them from least to greatest. So I'm going to take this list and I'm going to rewrite it from least to greatest. All right, least to greatest. So let me go ahead and pause my screen and relist these for us. All right, so now I listed them in their proper order. So now the first thing I'm going to do, let's do our median. Let's do our mode. The first one I'm going to answer is mode, because remember, mode means most. So which number occurs the most? Well, that's really easy. I see 160 occur twice. So 160 is our mode. It occurred the most, it occurred twice. So our mode is 160. So we're talking about this person or bowling. We can say, well, the score that they scored the most is 160. It allows us to talk about this data. It allows us to say, oh, well, the score that you've scored the most is 160. So that means that it's the one that might happen again. It's maybe the most likely score of happening. So it's something that we can use to describe. And now our median, remember the median means the middle. So for now, I'm going to just teach you a very easy way of doing this. I'm going to teach you a formula in like a video or two. But before we do that, I want you guys just practicing it once. Maybe you guys will be able to identify the formula on your own, but I will show you another way we can do this. But the easiest way of doing it and finding your median is simply crossing out your least greatest and then your most greatest, and keep crossing out one by one on each side until you either get to one number. That means that is your median, or as you'll see in our next video, you're going to get to two numbers. Because at this point, I can't cross out 135 because there's no other number for me to cross out with it, so I'm down to my 1. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do one more quick example of median and mode, just to talk about what happens when there's more than one number that occurs the same amount of time, and also what happens if we have an even number of scores or number of data. Because remember, this gave us odd 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When it's odd, I know my median will just be one number. All right, let's go through one more example. All right, so let's just say I give you this data set, and I ask you to find the median and the mode of this data set. So down here in the bottom, I will write median, and I will write mode. All right, remember, our median is our middle number, and our mode is our most. Okay, so when we're doing our median, or whenever we're doing our median, I need to rearrange these in the proper order from least to greatest. So I'm going to pause the video and I will rewrite these from least to greatest. All right, now if I count how many data sets I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Since it's an even number, I know to find my median, it's not just going to be one number. All right, even number means I'm going to have to find the average of two numbers. So let's go ahead and first let's find our mode. So our mode is a number that appears the most. So I'm going to go ahead and circle these in red. So I see I have 2 2s and I have 2 8s. So since they both occur the exact same amount of times, 2 each, that means my mode is both my 2 and my 8. So in this case, I can have 2 modes. They both occur the exact same amount. All right, let me go ahead and erase these yellow circles, and let's go ahead and move on to our next one. So our next one is our median, and it's really easy for right now. You guys can just do this, where I'm going to cross out my least and then my greatest, and I'm going to keep crossing out until I move into the middle. Now you see at this point, I can't cross out 6 because that will be going back towards this beginning stage. Like, see how I have 3 crossed out in both sections? If I cross out 6, then I would have more crossed out on my left than on my right. So I know it's not in the middle, or I know the 8 wouldn't be exactly in the middle. So when you get to this point, when it's an even number and you get to the 2 middles in the number, you take your average. And remember, our average or our mean is adding our values together, so 6 plus 8, and we divide it by however many data values that we have, and that means we have 2. So we will do 6 plus 8 divided by 2. So 6 plus 8 is 14 divided by 2 is 7. So that means my median is 7. So your median doesn't actually have to be a number that's in your data set. If it's an odd number, it will always be at least one value that's in your data set. But if it's even, it won't automatically. All right, and probably the easiest of all these to solve for, I guess maybe the second easiest because the mode is the easiest, will be our range. And let's talk about something first. So a measure of variation is a measure that describes the distribution of a data set. A simple measure of variation is called the range. And what the range is, it is the difference. So that means we are going to subtract the difference of our greatest value and the least value. All right, you don't have to rearrange these. We will in the future, though, because when we go to graph, when we learn what's called a box plot, we will have to arrange these. But if I just ask you strictly to find the range, you don't need to graph it. What we need to do is identify what is our least value and what is our greatest value. So when I look and see the ages of people in line for a roller coaster are 15, 17, 21, 32, 41, 30, 25, 52, 16, 39, 11, and 24. Well, 11 is my lowest age that's there, and 52 is my highest. So if I want to find the range, that means I would do 52 minus 11, which is equal to 41. So my range in this case is 41 years. And when it says to interpret the range, well, one of the things we can say is, since that is the age gap between the oldest person and the youngest person, we can make the statement that no two people are further apart than 41 years. Every single person, people that we pick, any pair, any two, when we subtract their ages, we can say that, well, no one will be more than 41 years apart in age. So it allows us to kind of talk about our highest and our lowest value. So if we think about this in terms of a test, if these were test scores, we can say, well, the range between the highest scored person and the lowest scored person was 41 points. So it allows for us to then think about this data in a little bit different, because if we have a huge wide range, then that means that our numbers are spread out all over depending on what we're doing. And it might mean in some cases that our data might not be that we may not be able to accurately discuss or reflect that. But we would use more than just a range when talking about that anyway. But we just simply take the highest value and the lowest value and we subtract them. All right, that is it for this video.